Shout out to Steve Train. Jump on the Steve Train. We real estate disruptors. See, we real estate disruptors.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining us for today's episode of Real Estate Disruptors. Today we have Lauren Hardy. She flew in from Orange County to share how she wholesaled 55 houses virtually last year. I want to start off by saying a very special thank you to everybody that's been so patient. We took the show off the air during the whole COVID coronavirus crisis, and so many of you have reached out to tell me how much you missed the show, and the truth is, I missed it too. So thank you guys for being so patient and sharing the love. If this is your first time tuning in, I'm Steve Trang, founder of the Offer Fast Homes app, the only MLS for off-market wholesale properties, and I help entrepreneurs create businesses that support their family, lifestyle, and goals through mentorship, and I'm on a mission to create 100 millionaires. I get asked all the time how to become one of those 100 millionaires, so please allow me to answer it here. The information on this podcast alone is enough to help you become a millionaire in the next 5 to 7 years. You don't need to pay for anything. However, if you want to shortcut that process 2 or 3 years off that time, you can always join us at Sales Training Mastermind at Disruptors.com. If you're excited for today's show, please give me a thumbs up. And as a friendly reminder, I do not charge a dime for this show. I don't make any money doing this. So here's all I ask: is what it costs for you to listen to this show. If you get value today, please tell a friend. You can share this episode right now, tag a friend below, or tell your best takeaway from the show later on. That way we can all grow together. And this is a live show, so please ask your questions for Lauren to answer. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, awesome. So first question, what got you into real estate?
Well, I started out in real estate right out of college, but yes, I've got 13 years of real estate experience, but I started in commercial real estate. I always assumed I would be in real estate. I think it was because my dad, he actually was a CPA and a college professor, and he always said if he could do it over again, he would have gotten into real estate.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So that was always ingrained in my head. So it was like this assumption growing up that like I would just be in real estate, and I went with it. So I started out in commercial real estate, very corporate world. I worked like the 8 to 5 grind. But what got me into investment real estate, I got started in house flipping. And I got started because I wanted more freedom of my schedule. I had just had my daughter. Oh. And yeah, I became a mom, and I realized that it was really hard to juggle corporate life and also your newborn baby.
Yeah.
So I wanted to just be self-employed, and I really honestly would have done anything at that point. And it just happened to be that house flipping was an option. So
I want to take a step back here because you mentioned, commercial. Like I saw you worked at Sperry Van Ness, which is a big outfit. It's not a small, it's not a mom and pop, commercial brokerage. So
right.
You started there. My understanding, in order to get started in commercial, is you need to hammer the phones.
Yes.
So is that what you had to do?
Yes. So my first day, first month, it was like they give you this big book of landlords, and these are industrial, retail, or office landlord building owners. You would have the building, a little small picture, the address, owner's name or LLC name, and the phone number. And it was like, go ahead, start dialing. So I had to get really good on the phones. And in fact, I was really good. I learned some secrets and tricks just from that experience alone that I take with me today with my seller negotiations.
Yeah, so I think that's really relevant, right? Because,
right.
Yeah, it was just this commercial real estate thing, but you have to grind to survive. And you were there for how long?
I did commercial real estate. Now, this was in the recession, so I started out in leasing office, industrial, retail buildings. And then I got a really cool opportunity with Subway restaurants and franchise development. So I did that for a little bit. And then I actually got a job with the Irvine Company, which was it's a major landlord. If you guys are familiar with the city of Irvine, they basically own every piece of land there.
Okay.
So I got into construction management with that job as well. So I bounced around in commercial real estate probably, I would say 4 or 5 years. It was right after college, a little bit in college. It started out with an internship, and then right after college until I started my house flipping business.
Yeah.
And I started flipping houses while I was working at the Irvine Company. So I was doing both at the same time for about a year.
Okay. So let's talk about your first flip. How did you come across first flip?
Okay, so this was awesome. This was like right after the recession. So let's take you back to 2012. Okay. My brother was flipping houses. I told him, man, I love your schedule is awesome. I need to do what you're doing because I have this little baby at home and she hardly even knows who I am because she spends more time with the babysitter than she does her own mother.
Yeah.
So my brother, he actually gave me some education. Back then it used to come in CDs. Okay. This is like before Rizuku. It used to come in these CDs and I popped them in my car and I would listen to them on my morning commute. I deep dove into education for like a week and I learned the basics of direct mail.
Yeah.
And that was my first seller marketing method. So I started sending sellers letters and I was targeting just specific cities like in Orange County. I really didn't know a whole lot about what I was doing, but at this time it was actually pretty easy to get a deal. There was still a lot of seller distress because we were just coming out of a recession.
Well, not a lot of people were buying.
Yeah.
Right? So
yeah.
this is like what, like 2011, 12? When was this?
2012.
2012.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, there was still a ton of seller distress. So I landed my first deal. It was a condo in Laguna Niguel. And it was literally could not have bought it a better time because right when I bought it, the market started going up. So as we held it, the property went up like 10%.
Right.
Which
you
was
get the
awesome.
benefit.
I got the benefit.
Appreciation.
Literally, yeah, it was the best. It was the best. So it was a condo. We fixed it up, put it back on the market, flipped it. I did it with my brother. So the first 2 deals I did, I partnered with my brother.
Okay.
And then I went on my own from that point. And in that, both of those deals were actually they were condos. Both happened to be in Laguna Niguel. And they both were $60,000 paydays. Each of them.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can imagine, I was like, oh my God, this business is so easy.
Of course.
Yeah. I was like, oh my God.
Those HGTV numbers were actually real back then.
They were back then. They were. And I was like, oh my God, this is like so easy. Like I just literally made more money. Because at the time in my corporate job, I was making like $55,000 a year.
Really?
Yeah.
Even with Subway as a client.
Well, it wasn't. I worked for Subway, but then at this point, I was working for the Irvine company. It was just a salary job. And this is still out of a recession, so like these, it was hard to get like a salary job.
So you made as much in 1 year on
Yes.
each of those deals.
Correct. Now I split them with my brother.
Sure.
So at this point, I said I will quit my corporate job when I have a full year salary in savings. So it took me a year to flip those 2 deals. At this point, I had my second baby on the way. So I went on maternity leave. I had my second daughter, and then I didn't go back to work because I had the money in savings to be able to do so.
Very cool.
So I was on my high horse at that time.
So you said it was easy. Were there any challenges?
Yes. Right when I quit my job.
Okay.
So I quit my job. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is so easy. Well, what happened was direct mail became like a thing. You know, there's like this podcast called Bigger Pockets and people are talking about direct mail and all of a sudden everybody's doing direct mail in my area.
Yeah.
And the deals were drying up. I was having sellers say, oh yeah, I get like 3-4 of these postcards a week. And I'm going, what? Like, I'm not the only one sending these now? Like, what is going on? So the deals started drying up and it started to get scary. It started to get where a couple months would go by and I wouldn't be able to get a flip deal. And then it was like 4 months would go by and I wouldn't have a deal in the pipe. And at that point, I was getting really worried that maybe this isn't a sustainable business. Yeah. So that was my start, and it started high. I was on my high horse at first, and then, you know, I got a reality check.
Well, I think that happens to some people, right? I think this industry, you know, there's a little bit of luck involved, right?
Yes.
So you can have 20 people take the same amount of action, 18 of them won't have any action, right? And then 2 of them will hit home runs, and then they have this mindset, okay, I've got it, I figured it out, and then probably 1 of those 2 will actually make it.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I would add to that it's luck and location.
Yeah.
Because where I was the problem. There was no short of hard work over here.
Yeah.
It was just I was in a very competitive market, and I came to that realization actually a couple years later, and we can talk more about that later. But That's kind of where the start came from.
Well, so you're talking about the deal started drying up, right? So 2 months go by, 4 months go by before you had a deal. How long did you said a couple years that you're just writing this out with direct mail only to only your surrounding areas, only in Orange County?
So then I started expanding. So then I thought, okay, well, Orange County, this is getting too hard. So I started widening the net. I started from LA, even like North LA. My furthest deal was a place called Rosemont, and it was 2.5 hours away from my home. So that was like my first experience with like virtual.
Yeah.
And clear out to the Inland Empire. So that would be like Riverside and San Bernardino County. So my net was huge. I mean, to get to a seller meeting, it would take me like 3 hours out of my day to do one seller meeting. It was crazy.
Well, that's fascinating because I have a theory, right? One of the reasons why all the iBuyers and everyone else starts in Phoenix and why there's so many freaking gurus here is that it takes literally 40 minutes to get to any part of town.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it doesn't matter where you are. It takes you 40 minutes just to get to the other part of town. Whereas in LA or Orange County, depending on the time, depending on the day, it could take you 25 minutes. It could take you 3 hours.
Yeah.
And
that's crazy.
So that was my suspicion as to why, you don't have as many big operations in Southern California. So you did this, and then eventually you transitioned then into, is this when you transitioned into virtual, or what happened? How did you get to virtual from here?
So my decision to go full virtual, I had hemmed and hawed about this decision for quite a while. It really started with a lot of frustration. So I was, doing everything that these gurus and my educators were saying. I was a part of high-level masterminds. I was going to seminars. I was, riding the education train that a lot of people do, right? But I was so frustrated. I would go and I would see these other people closing, 5 deals a month, no big deal. I would see people that had way less experience than me at this point. At this point, maybe I have 3 years into this game, and they're newbies, like, in their 6th month of the business, already at like a pipeline of 5 deals a month. And I'm going, what am I doing wrong? So it wasn't until I went to a seminar in Nashville, and I remember it was like, this just pushed me over the edge. I was sitting and I had more experience than everybody there. It was about maybe 20 people in the room, and there were so many people that had under a year's experience that were already, closing like 5 deals a month regularly. And I look around, and at first I was like, I had this inferiority complex. Like, gosh, is it because, I don't know, maybe because I'm a tired mom and I just can't put as much in it? Am I not working hard enough? I started, I was attacking myself personally. And when I sat in that room with those people and I started getting really deep with them. How many hours do you work a day? How many seller leads do you get? How many offers do you make a week? When I realized that there's really only a few things that you need to measure. It's how many leads, how many offers do you make, how many contracts are you getting, how many deals are you closing? Those 4 things, when I asked all those people in that room, I realized that my numbers were way higher. I needed way more leads to get to that end result of the closed deal.
Yeah.
So that's why I was exhausted. That's why I wasn't closing that many deals. That was like that moment where I realized, oh, it's not me, it's where I live.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So,
and it makes sense for sure.
Right.
In Southern California. And I can't remember who was telling me this story. But it was Sean Terry. He was doing a webinar, and he was going over his metrics. And he was talking about the KPIs, just like we talked about. How many leads do you need to have an appointment? How many appointment to a contract? How many contracts to close?
Right.
And he was sharing his metrics, and there was laughter on the phone on the webinar. And he was like, "What are you guys laughing at?" It's like, how does it take 80 people to have one contract?
Right.
Right? Because for us, that's what we need to do. Southern California, maybe more competitive.
Right.
But in the Midwest, people are friendly. We got another buddy, Eric Sage, and he was saying, we were in a mastermind, and he said the reason why he loves in Birmingham, here we call somebody and they're like, "Get the F off! Why are you calling me? I'm tired of this crap."
You're right.
And he's calling Birmingham. They're like, "This isn't it, but we hope you find him."
It's so true. It is so true. I mean, when you talk to, I'll tell you, if you really want to get laid out, talk to a California seller.
Yeah.
They will chew you up and spit you out.
Right.
So I was used to that. So going to, these Midwest markets that I'm in was, a delight. speaking to those sellers compared to what I was used to.
So you go, this is Nashville, right?
Right. That was my first virtual market.
So you started wholesaling in Nashville.
I actually started building houses in Nashville. That was my first virtual endeavor.
Wow. Tell me about that.
So I was the Nashville story is started with a seminar that I went to that got me so frustrated that I said, okay, I need to figure out, maybe I need to diversify so not all my eggs are in one basket, so to speak, that one basket being Southern California. So while I was in Nashville, I pulled up a bunch of cash sales in the area and I just drove around for a day. When I was driving around, I noticed that all the cash sales that were like 6 months earlier were like these brand new homes. I was really confused. I was like, what? This is like a brand new home. This could not have been a flip. And then I realized there's like all these old homes getting knocked down and new homes being built in their place. And there was like, if there was maybe one house, they'd knock them down and build two.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd never seen anything like this. This does not really happen in California, maybe in the beach cities. So I was like, what is this? So I saw a construction site on the side of the road. I saw a guy out there. I pulled over and I was like, hey, are you the project manager here on this job? He was like, yeah, I own a development company. I was like, oh, so like what's going on in this neighborhood? Like, what is all this? And we just started talking, and a cool conversation turned into us looking at homes that he's building in the neighborhood. I went on a seller meeting with him. I went on like 3 tours looking at these new homes he built. And at the end of it, I was like, I want to work with you.
Yeah.
So I told him, find me a deal. I'll find the money. You'll be my contractor. He was the builder at the time. And, let's do this. So he actually got me together with a wholesaler.
Mm-hmm.
And I bought my first piece of land from that wholesaler. I believe this was 2015. And we built 2 homes in its place, and then I did it again on the same street.
Yeah.
So that was my first like virtual endeavor, was actually just ground up construction.
And how did that go?
It went really well, actually. I would argue that ground up construction is much easier than flipping, because with a new home with ground up, I mean, there's nothing they can really lie about.
Mm-hmm.
It's your first bid is what you see is what you get. I mean, unless you change your materials midway. For the most part, like the contractor should have budgeted for everything, and you shouldn't have any change orders.
No surprises.
But with a flip, you're going to have change orders, and especially a virtual flip with a contractor that knows you're not there, you're going to see lots of change orders.
Yeah.
So,
gotcha.
Right.
So are you still doing that, or what's the story now?
So after a while, I tried flipping homes in Nashville, didn't like flipping, liked building much better. Then I started just wholesaling in Nashville. Nashville was just hot at this time, okay? Nashville was popping. So I stayed there for a bit, but Nashville started getting so competitive. What happened was I was having a very difficult time being virtual in Nashville because I couldn't see what was going on that street. So like I would do direct to seller marketing. A seller would call me and I would make an offer based off of just what I could see on Google Earth and what comps I could pull. But what I don't realize is that maybe like next door there's a house being knocked down, and the seller can take my offer and then walk to that builder and go, hey, I want to sell mine too. What would you offer me? And of course that guy's going to beat me. He's in front of the seller. He can kind of probably be a little bit more flexible with his pricing because he's already got a job on the same street. Mm-hmm. So I kept getting outbid.
Yeah.
And after a while, I was like, this is just, there's got to be easier markets to do virtually. So I decided to try a different type of market. And this is really important when you're virtual. There are different types of markets. A lot of people don't realize this. A lot of like my students, they don't realize that there's different end plays in every market, and some are better than others if you are virtual. I would argue that landlord markets are better for virtual investors. So I wanted to get into a more sort of balanced market, and so that took me to the Midwest.
Yeah.
And now I run a volume wholesaling business in the Midwest, and primarily we're selling rental properties to multi-unit landlord investors.
So why is rental a better exit strategy for virtual wholesaling?
I would say one is the repair situation that typically with a rental, the end buyer is not going to really repair the house too much. They're going to make it rent ready. So the repair number is fairly low and it's very easy to estimate. Also, a lot of these rental markets, like the houses, you basically are paying based off the rent that they support. Right. So it's easier to comp. It's just easier. I would say in those ways. Also, the price points being lower, I would argue that an easy way to tell if a market is going to be like easier or harder, that's such a relative term, or competitive. Everybody says my market's so competitive. Like, go to California, I'll tell you what competitive is. The easiest way to see is just go look like at the average house price. Like, type in insert city or insert county average house price Zillow, and Zillow has like every city in there. It does. And it's like, if you see that it's above like $275,000, you're probably going to see that it's more competitive because it's a more desirable area. So I like the more Midwestern, like rental market type markets, because the price point is lower, so it's a little bit less competitive.
So how do you determine, like you said, you want to go after the rental markets? There's plenty of rental markets,
right?
How do you figure out which one's the right one?
Honestly, there's amazing places in the United States to invest. Everybody goes to like the major metros. A lot of like the students that I speak with and people that are interested, it's like they all want to be in the same places. And I try to steer them away because there are so many great rental markets. I would pick an area with strong values. You don't really want, I personally don't want to play around in a $50,000 or lower territory. I want to see that the average house prices are at least $120,000-$130,000, and then to maybe $275,000. So if you pick a market that you're in that sweet spot, and the rents, look in the same area and figure out what the rents are. A lot of people like the 1% rule. If it matches, if you can make a 1% rent to price work in that area, I would say that could be a really great rental market. But as far as what is a good virtual market, which I think is like the real question, I always tell everybody, you want to search for the proven strategy or the proof of concept is what I say. So what does that even mean? That means asking around and seeing, are other people successful in doing what you are trying to do in this market? It's that simple. Go online, go to Bigger Pockets, go to your group, say, insert city here, anybody wholesaling houses, I have a question. See how many people raise their hand. I am. How many deals are you doing?
Right.
See if there's successful people. If there are a good amount of people that you can network with that are successful, the idea is, well, if they can do it, so can I.
Absolutely. So one question I have then is, that we're talking about these other markets, is do you have in lower price market, right? Because we say, California's competitive because of the high prices, and one of the reasons why is because you have larger margins. So, for us, we target 15K in Phoenix, and I think part of the country they're targeting, 10 to 15K. Is there a fee that you're targeting in these areas, or is it the same?
What I've noticed is it's not so much a dollar, it's a percentage. So what I've typically noticed is the wholesale fees are typically 10% of the end price or the final sale price. So if you sell it to your landlord buyer for $100,000, I would hope your minimum is that you're getting is $10,000.
Right.
So I've personally noticed it's more of a percentage versus like an amount.
Okay, so you don't have to worry if you're going in these markets that your fee is going to get compressed.
No, and I think it's a misnomer with California. A lot of people say, oh, but you get these big fees. Well, not necessarily, because what if you have a bunch of other investors that bid up the price and there's no wholesale fee, which is quite frankly most of the time in these direct to seller leads that you're going to get in a LA market, LAOC. You're going to have that these sellers got 15 other cash offers that they can weigh yours against, and now the wholesale fee is $0.
Yeah.
So
I was in the conversation chain for Closers Olympics, and I was seeing what they were talking about, and they were saying like in California, the offers you need to make in California, there is just no room for mistakes.
Nothing.
There's no room for like, a COVID happens. You're just screwed, right? Like, okay, well, our fee went from 15 to 3. We're still going to survive.
Right.
But man, like they're just so freaking tight. I don't know how anyone, is able to survive with that kind of stress.
They become realtors. That honestly, like a lot of the people that we're doing, like
wholesalers and
wholesalers and the flippers, they become realtors during this time. And then if we see an adjustment, they'll go back into flipping.
Okay, gotcha. So someone that's listening right now and they're saying, okay, well, I want to give virtual a shot. Realistically, let me take a step back. What would someone need to do? Like they're listening to the show, they're getting beat up in their markets. Let's say they're in Phoenix, LA, Seattle, right, where it's just more competitive. Denver. They're all right. I'm going to give virtual a shot. What are the first few steps they need to take?
Well, I would say the first step is that they need to put in their mind and make that decision 100% that is what they are going to do.
They've got to go all in.
They've got to go all in. You can't have this decision, okay? Like you have to go all in. You have to make the decision that and that you fully believe that the amount of effort that it is going to take for you to wholesale houses virtually is going to be actually less effort, easier than wholesaling in your backyard. For me, I was able to do that. It took a lot of supporting evidence. I was phoning friends, asking people, that were in other markets and seeing how much effort they were making. And by effort, I mean, how many seller leads do you have to talk to get a deal? After a while, I had the evidence that, okay, it's going to be easier if I go to a Midwestern market versus Southern California. So the first thing is make that decision. And then from there, you want to pick a market. And I think I said it earlier, look for the proven concept. There's a lot of people they want to analyze this. Like they want to pull the cash sales to the ratio of the population, because if it's higher, then that means that it would be less competitive. I mean, there's all these matrix, and
they're just going too far into it.
You're going way too deep, guys, because that actually does not work. That does not necessarily mean it's less competitive or more.
Yeah.
A lot of for example, they'll say, oh wow, well there's only 200 absentee owned purchases in the last 6 months, and the population is 1 million. To me, that's crap. That's not good. That means that there's, for some reason, and buyers aren't buying there.
Yeah.
So you want to be careful with those kind of numbers. Instead, look for the proven concept. That's when you want to go network, go to your page, go to, Bigger Pockets, Wholesaling Inc., all of the big, groups, and network and find these different areas that people are doing well in and search for the proven concept.
Right.
Once you pick your territory, then it's gangbusters. You can do your direct to seller marketing. I mean, everything works virtually. People say, what's the best marketing technique virtually? Well,
that's great, because that was my next question.
Yeah, I mean, what's the next marketing technique? Okay, what's the best one? Well, they all work. There's no difference. You just have to get really good at the phone. Yeah. And I would say that maybe that was back in my old Sperry Vaness days of being handed a book of phone numbers that I got really good at, talking to sellers on the phone. I think I'm pretty good at talking in general.
It's a life commitment towards being good at talking.
Yeah, it is.
All right, so let's go through some questions here. Looks like we don't have as many questions as normal. So Mr. Hull wants to know, was raising capital difficult? I guess probably for the flipping in or developing in Tennessee. How was that process of convincing everyone you were going to start developing in Tennessee?
You know what? I already had the capital invested. I'd already done enough flips with them locally, so they knew I was good for it. They knew that I pay my investors back before I pay myself, and I never not pay an investor back. My investors know that, so it wasn't that hard. But I think in general, the broader question is raising capital difficult? I would say, it's a mindset thing. It is if you think it is, but honestly, there's a lot of high net worth individuals that are dying to make the type of interest rates that real estate investors can offer on an asset that is a tangible asset that they can tie a trust deed to.
That's secured.
That's secured. Absolutely.
You can touch it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, people go nuts for this kind of deal.
Let's see, what else is there? Yeah, so actually a couple of these guys are in Nashville, so they know exactly what you're talking about. So Daniel Moore wants to know, how much do you spend on marketing? So monthly marketing spend.
You know what? Okay, I now lump in like all of my expenses because it's not direct mail as the game anymore for me. It's more of your cold calling. It's more of your mass texting, which it's people. Like, I need people to cold call, and I need people to text message. I also have like acquisition managers, disposition managers. So it's hard to quantify. I mean, I would say maybe at least 12 to 15,000 in marketing. And I do online. I do some web SEO, Facebook. So I would say at least 15.
Yeah.
Right.
For you, right? So what if someone wants to get started? What kind of budget should they be looking at?
Honestly, I think it depends on what kind of budget you have. There's, the beating the bushes, down and dirty, don't have a marketing budget, to you do have some money in the bank and you can do it. Obviously, it's great to be on that right side, but not everybody is as fortunate. I didn't have that kind of money. In fact, I had no money when I got started. I started with a credit card. I literally had to call Visa and increase my limit. And that was my marketing budget. That was my investment. So I know what it's like to start from nothing. And what's amazing is with cold calling, you don't have to have a lot of money. You just have to have the money to buy a list and pay for an auto dialer. That's helpful. So really, I mean, it depends on how big your list is. I mean, for $1,000, $1,500, you could get a pretty big list that'll keep you busy for a couple months.
Right. And one thing, I put this here, I forgot to mention this, but, I was doing my research on you, and I met you last year, right? We met at the batch office. You came in to do Brent Daniels' TTP podcast, right? And so I remember, it seemed like you came out of nowhere, but then as I was doing my research and I was finding out, actually, Lauren's been working really hard for a very long time. In fact, you were on Bigger Pockets not too long, like 4 years ago. Something like that?
So maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah. But I think the point here is, for some of the people that are frustrated that it takes how long it takes to get successful, how long it takes to get traction. So I just want to emphasize, it seemed to me like you came out of nowhere, but you've been at this for a very long time.
Yes, I have. I always say in this business, I mean, I used to get so frustrated at the people that I would hear on these podcasts, and they'd be like, oh, how did you get started? And they're like, well, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and then I decided I was going to send some direct mail, and then 6 months later, I've closed 15 deals, and now I'm making $100,000 a month. That was not me. I was the total turtle. I was a slow mover. I did the best I could. I did work at this every single day, and I improved every single day, but it was not easy for me. I've been at this 8 years. A lot of people don't realize that, but I have been doing this for 8 years. And I always say, there is this perception that I came out of nowhere, but that isn't true. And there's a lot of people that do come out of nowhere. And I always say the term bright stars burn out the fastest.
Yeah.
And sometimes in our business, it's easy to kind of feel inferior when you compare yourself.
Yeah. I
know, because I did that a lot, and I know that probably a lot of the audience, they compare themselves. Why am I not as good as Jack Smith in Indianapolis? And it's well, because your situation is probably completely different than that guy. And that Jack Smith might just be a bright star who is going to burn out. Half of what he's saying might not even be true.
Right.
So you really have to just pay attention to what you're doing every day. And that's what I tried to do. Every time I got those negative thoughts of feeling inferior, I had to remind myself that I'm on my own journey. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been a wild ride. But
I think it's an important point. I'm glad you are able to, extrapolate on it and, control what you control, right? Control the controllables.
Yeah.
Don't worry about what everyone else is doing. Just control what you can control. And I think that's a big part here. So you're acquiring virtually. So you said cold calling, direct mail, texting. How are you moving the properties?
Well, right now, how we're pretty dialed in where we're at. So I have the boots on ground that are my boots on ground. I don't JV partner anymore.
Oh, really?
And when I say JV, joint venture, I mean, or work with like co-wholesalers. We are the co-wholesaler actually. Like now people go to us, even though we're virtual, we have the better buyers list now because we've been,
great.
We're like really dialed into the 2 territories that we're in. But to start, I would say everybody should start by working with a co-wholesaler or a joint venture partner. I call them JV partners, so you might hear me throw that slang around. I recommend starting that way. Don't try to do it all yourself. Don't try to do what I'm doing now when you get started in a virtual market. That is like the biggest mistake that people make, and they fail, and then they say virtual doesn't work, and it's because you didn't know how to move that property.
Right. Gotcha. So you built your own buyers list.
We did, but at first we started with JV partners. So we did that for a while. I would say we worked with JVs for, I don't know, I mean, at least our first 10 deals, and then we tapered it off because the buyers started, we worked on our buyers list on the side, and there's some technicalities there that, I can get into, but it's super micro. But we built our buyers list on the side, and then we started marketing our deals, with the JV partner, and it was just this organic process of then it turned into now we have our boots on ground. We don't really need to share our fees anymore.
Right. And I think that's just a natural evolution for every wholesaler, regardless of whether you're virtual or not.
Yeah, definitely.
Jason Toledo wants to know, what's the best strategy for closing at a title company or attorney when you're wholesaling remotely? So are there any different challenges when you're wholesaling virtually versus locally?
You want to find the wholesaler friendly title company, and the best way to do that is working with your JV partner. Your JV partner should have the title company that they use, and then you start piggybacking off of it, and then that's your title company that you use.
Makes total sense. Leo Guara wants to know, what is your why in this business besides the money?
Honestly, it's funny. I think having a monetary why is like the most useless why that you can have. I mean, I've tried putting like monetary goals up on my vision board, and it's like, those are just numbers. Like they don't mean anything. I don't feel like they impact me as much, or maybe they just don't like resonate in my brain because they're just irrelevant numbers. Instead, for me, it's like this fear of having to get a job. Like I have like I got in this business because I was, a new mom, and my daughter, she literally from 6 weeks old was at a daycare from 7 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night. And I still remember, like, she's like 5 months old, and I'm picking her up, and she's clinging to the daycare provider, sobbing, because she is actually more used to the daycare provider than me. And that was a bad day.
I say that's probably more the why.
That was the why.
Than the job.
So, right. So the why is my kids. Now my kids are now 6 and 9, so they recognize me when they know who I am now. But my own baby did not know who I was. That's how hard it was to juggle corporate life. And I have that in me, if you don't make this business work, if you don't get up and work today and make money, you're going to have to get a job. And then your kids are going to have to sit at daycare. And I just imagine them like little orphan Annies, just at daycare, eating crackers and all alone. I don't know. I have this big fear of getting a job. And that's my why, is my kids. It really is just, it's my kids, and having that work-life balance as a mother, and I'm a single mother, so that adds a whole other thing of being in control of my schedule has really helped with managing my custody schedule and being a single mom. So that's my why.
Well, I think you can see it as well, right, in just the fact that your handle is This Mom Flips.
Yes
right? So, but that's good. I mean, you're very clear on it, which is something I think most people would kill for, honestly, to have clarity on their why.
Right.
So Tag Thompson wants to know, how long will it take to get his first deal virtually? So let's just assume he's at 0. How long will someone at 0 take to get their first deal virtually?
I think it depends on the person, because it depends on how much you let analysis paralysis get to you. What I noticed, there's this evolution of the students that I coach where they're all gung-ho and they go through my modules and then they freak out. And like they just get in this analysis paralysis. And it depends on how long you want to sit there and overanalyze your business plan.
Yeah.
I recommend analyzing your business for about a week. But I've seen people, they get really stuck in this. So anytime I see people stuck for about a couple weeks, and I'm like, okay, why haven't you done any seller marketing? Then I start, putting their feet to the fire a little bit, and I call them out like, hey, you're overanalyzing this thing. Yeah. You got to go. So if I could cut that analysis paralysis to like a 1 week, I've seen students get where they get their first contract in 60 days and they're closing in 90. Yeah. That's about the average for the student that does not spend 4 months overanalyzing.
And that makes total sense.
Totally.
I mean, there's procrastination or perfection. It really kills a lot of businesses, even outside of wholesale, just a lot of businesses.
It does. I mean, I always say perfectionism is actually another word for procrastination, or analysis paralysis is really procrastination. Yeah. It's really just their excuse to not doing the thing they're afraid of because they're perfecting their business plan, or they're making sure they really, their CRM is really dialed in, and, they have the perfect lists.
I know. It pains me every time I see it too. And you see it a lot, unfortunately.
You do.
Ricky Miller wants to know, would you say in a virtual market making offers on properties, is there something you'd recommend on, I guess, the process of making offers over the phone?
Honestly, yeah, I'm like religious about seller conversations. I have my own script and my own negotiation techniques, and I've honed them in from years and years in thousands of sellers that I've spoken with. I am I'm a people pleaser. I'm non-confrontational. I was that newer investor.
You're non-confrontational?
I am non-confrontational.
I'm surprised.
I am a people pleaser. You'll see, I'm very likable.
You're gonna beat that into me.
Yeah, no, trust me, you'll like me by the end of this. No, I definitely, I was that newer investor that was scared to offend a seller with a lowball offer. I hated it. So I found ways to deliver offers in the most non-confrontational, just ease them into it. And the first thing that I would say that I do, and this is not just virtual, I mean, this is just giving good phone. Okay, you guys should all do this, and it doesn't matter if this is virtual or not. The first thing that I do is I just make sure, that the seller likes me. Like, that's number one, is just be friendly and don't talk about price up front. There is this book, and I never can remember the name. I think the author should have came up with a better name because it's not very memorable. But it talks about the croc brain and how somebody remembers this book or read it. It's red and white. I think it's called Pitch Anything. And it talks about how, okay, you're surprising a seller out of the blue, cold calling them or texting them. And they are on the defense. Okay, that's their croc brain. It's very primal. Think of a crocodile, and they're going to bite your head off. Okay, they're very unsure of who you are. So that is not a time in that first conversation to discuss something as personal as price on their home. That is, I don't know, a lot of people make that mistake.
Well, I think they make that mistake because the sellers ask for their price.
Yes.
Right.
And I mean, if they flat out ask, I say, I need to know more about the home, and then I start going into the conversation.
Right.
In the first conversations, I just want the seller to like me. That's it. And I tell my acquisitions people, they just need to like you. They need to know your name. You need to know their name, what their plans for the home was, why they're selling, what their dog's name is that's barking in the background, and what breed. I want you to develop some kind of rapport that you can put in the database and our CRM that you can then go back to. So if it's how was that trip you went on, that you said, how was that, I don't know, how was your cruise or whatever, something that you can draw back on in the next conversation, because the next conversation is when their guard's going to be down a little bit because they already like you from the first one.
Right, you built rapport.
Built rapport. Now you're going to talk about price. So that's how I recommend it, is get them to like you first. You want to go back, come up with an offer price. And I like to offer more of it in a price range versus I'm going to offer you $75,000 for your home. Instead, I like to say, it looks like investors are buying homes in this area for between, I don't know, maybe 65 to 78,000. Does that sound about right? And then if the seller balks at that, I test their reaction to that. If the seller sounds offended, then I say, well, look at, okay, well, let me just show you a couple comps, because maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I messed up.
Yeah.
Did you see that house on 123 Main Street? It sold for 68, and then that's where you start pulling out your comps to support your narrative. Now it's, well, don't shoot the messenger. It's not my fault that your neighbor sold their house for $68,000.
Yeah.
And then at this point now they're mad at the neighbor. They're not mad at you.
Right.
And you're on their team, right? So that's how I like to get to the price.
Well, I like the part where you said, maybe I missed something.
Right. Maybe I messed up.
Let's look at these properties together. Right. We're as a team here.
Yep.
Let's look at these properties together.
Absolutely.
What did I miss?
I always say that. Maybe I messed up.
Yeah, I love it. It's great. Daniel Mark has another question. What metrics are you using to target sellers? I don't really understand that question. Maybe you do.
I'm not sure either. Are you talking about like seller marketing? Probably seller marketing is my guess.
Yeah, Daniel, clarify that question.
Okay.
Marcus Mack, what lists are you pulling from?
Okay, so let's talk maybe what are my favorite lists. I am the laziest when it comes to these niche lists. I don't like pulling niche lists. They're a pain. I don't want to go to a courthouse. You are not going to see me like going to a courthouse, okay? Yeah. Or a city to pull a list. I like your basic vacant list. I like a tax delinquent or tax lien list stacked with absentee as well. So they have to be an absentee owner that has a tax lien. And then I just love the absentee owner list. That's like my all day.
I think that's a very big wholesaling Inc. thing. Like
just keep it simple, you guys. Like, I mean, honestly,
Don't overthink it.
Don't overthink it. I've gotten a code enforcement list. It was junk. Like, I got no deals from that list. I was like, this is, and I was doing probates forever. Probates, junk. Never did one probate. Got screamed at all the time. Why would you do something so negative?
Yeah, definitely.
You don't need that negativity in your life.
Joey Word asks, is there one virtual market that you think is especially right to jump into right now? Is there one that you maybe have your eye for, like a third market?
No. There's so many great markets, you guys. And you guys, if I tell you like one market, do you know how ming people, how big is your audience? How many people are going to listen to this?
We typically get about 7,000 people.
Okay, so 7,000 people, at least 10% are going to go to like that market. So I'm going to go to Yorksville, Ohio. All right. Great market.
Perfectly valid point. Tracy Jennings wants to know, is there a population that you say it has to have at least this many people?
Yeah, you definitely don't want to, I say this word funny, rule.
Yeah.
Everybody laughs at how I say that word. You don't want markets that are too small. You don't want like farm towns. You don't want like the Appalachian Mountains or anything like that. I would say at least 250,000 population. I've heard some people say 150 is okay. I don't. Well, I take that back. I do. There's one area, a 150,000 population, and then the county next to it has 150 as well. So you can kind of do something like that, where it's like in the county, there's maybe 150, and then there's a neighboring county that's really good that you can draw from if you kind of max out that county.
Right.
Yeah. So you just don't want anything too small.
And I think Clifford appreciates the story because he feels like his first year, there was a lot of focus, not as much activities. Let's see. Adrian, Nez, give you some love. Definitely the real deal.
Thanks, Adrian.
Jason Toledo, when JVing remotely, how did you protect yourself other than using any JV or assignment contracts? That's an interesting point because I recommend everyone JV with a contract. But I've never used a contract for a JV. I
don't either. I know. I'm the same way. It's like, you should do this, but then in reality, I'm like, I don't do it.
Well, if I have a problem, I'm going to call Jamil.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to call Pace and like, what the hell happened here?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, for me, it's like the JVs that I've used have a reputation.
A relationship.
And they, like, where I could easily call, like they, other people recommended them to me. They know people. So if they did, if there was any funny business, you could kind of out them. You could get them blacklisted a little bit, So
Pace is here, so he commented.
Hi, Pace.
So it's funny. Pace and I, we had a deal that we were doing together.
Yeah.
And something went kind of crazy. Not his fault, right? Like the end buyer, and we had to have. He said, we had to have a principal come to the principal's office conversation.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Someone's in trouble.
Ketsa wants to know what are the two markets that you're in?
I'm in Oklahoma City and Tulsa, Oklahoma. Don't go there. Do you know how many people I tell that out loud, and then you guys are all like, Oklahoma is the virtual market. There's a lot of virtual markets.
Actually, I've talked to some people. I was back in Dallas at We Live, so March of 19. I was talking to some people, and they're like, Oklahoma is amazing. That there's no competition there. I think that's probably changed in the last year and a half.
Major. There's a ton of competition. It's my fault because I go on these podcasts and tell people I'm in Oklahoma, and then everybody's in Oklahoma. It's actually pretty competitive, especially with the cold calling and the texting.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
And I know a couple other people down there as well. It's not as easy as as I had heard a couple years ago.
Yeah, and there's actually, I tested out like smaller markets. Like I said, there was one I was like testing out because I just mainly for my students, 150,000 population. Amazing. Like I was like, okay, so I got to make it's a market that I'm just dipping into, and I need to hire before I get distracted on it. I need to hire more people because you don't want in your operation, I'm going to go to a new territory. Now everybody's spread thin. You have to hire someone to handle the new territory.
Right.
That's another thing. People make a mistake is they haven't even mastered their one virtual market, and they already want to go to 3.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. Like, then you need 3 people. Like, you need someone managing that market.
Yeah.
They're like little babies.
Well, another thing too, with too small of a market, what we found in our program is if you could buy the entire area very quickly.
Yeah.
All the data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you run out.
And there's just like, okay, what's next? So I think that's something to be careful of. I think this is a softball question. I think you and I have the same answer here, but what are your thoughts on paying for mentorship?
I think that paying for mentorship, if you can afford it, is absolutely the way to go. So I personally paid for mentorship all 8 years. I constantly, still to this day, I have a coach. I think every business owner, any business, any entrepreneur should have a coach. When you go with a coaching program, you are shortening your learning curve. So like you could go to YouTube University, and what I see with YouTube University is it gives you vision, but it doesn't give you direction. So what happens is that people start getting excited and they get all these ideas in their head, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna drive for dollars and cold call and text, and like they're going like all over the place. Whereas with a program like, for me, I can only speak for myself, I give you a roadmap. I'm like, here, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and like anytime I see my students like squirrel, I'm like, stop doing that. Like, and I'll be honest with them, like you're doing that shiny object thing again. Like, get back on the path. So with mentorship, you are shortening your learning curve. You're getting direction and vision as well.
Yeah.
So it's very powerful. And I don't know very many people that are successful wholesalers that did not pay into their education.
Right. Oh, you have to. I think that one of the other things too, you kind of hit it on the vision, is the clarity. The amount of confidence you get being able to say, hey, Lauren, here's what I'm thinking. And you're like, that's a great idea. It's like, no, that's stupid.
Exactly. And I mean, I obviously, like, I don't hold back, and I can be a little like, no, that's really dumb. Like, don't do that, and I will be honest with my students. One thing, I noticed that with my students, it's not even following the direction. That's the problem. It's more of, there's usually a fear-based or an emotional kind of component that is stopping them from progressing. So I like to say that the part that really my coaching really pays for itself is me getting you past that emotional or fear-based mindset. So a lot of my students, like a perfect example is I had this guy who was terrified of talking to sellers. I mean, he was so scared, like I could feel like him like shaking like through the phone when he was telling me this fear. He was terrified of just doing a basic seller qualifying call. He wouldn't do it. And we sat on the phone on a Saturday and I just told him like, what's the worst that can happen? I mean, I was like a therapist, like what's the worst that can happen? You're not doing anything illegal. What can they do? They hang up on you. Well, what if like I don't know what to say? Hang up on them and say that you lost reception. It's like prank calling.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe like it was the best thing ever to be stuck in a cubicle when I was like 21 years old at Sperry Van Ness with a phone book, because that was awkward. Like that was very awkward, like being 21, picking up the phone, calling these old landlords that lived.
It's amazing experience. It's amazing, relevant experience for what we do.
It is. And it was very awkward. People could hear me talk. Like I was in an office, like they could hear what I'm saying. I sound so like I didn't know what I was talking about, you know? And so I think like just having that like level of embarrassment was so good for me. And I think that was what that student was going through. He was just so like shy to talk to the sellers.
Yeah.
He got over it and had his first contract in like 10 days after that Saturday session with me. And it was like the best like ever. I was so proud of him. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's all about like breaking through. And that's the coaching. I think the coaching helps you break through those fears.
Absolutely. That's what you're getting out of it. Francisco asked a really great question. So, you know, you started slow in your career. You had a great jump start, but then you kind of slowed down, had some challenges. What made you stick around?
Honestly, I'm not a quitter. I don't give up on anything. Like I'm really, really stubborn. And I think that that is sometimes it's a great thing. Sometimes I don't quit things fast enough. So I do have that issue. It's like a double-edged sword. Like I am persistent and I will persevere, but I also sometimes am guilty of not quitting on people fast enough, quitting on employees fast enough, quitting on ideas that aren't working fast enough. I mean, that happens to me as well. So it really was, I put it in my head. I refused to give up. And I refuse to give up.
Yeah. And I think that people ask me, like, what is the most common trait or characteristics we see from everyone that's on the show? And that's the one. It's that grit. It's that persistence. Like, I will not die. Right? Yeah. This is going to happen.
It's not an option.
Yeah. So I love it. And then Action REI asks, how do you vet a mentor?
That's a really good question. So I think the word that comes to me is perspective. You want to have a mentor that has the same perspective as you. So this brings me back to when I was getting started, and the mentors that I had, many of them gave me really bad advice because they did not have the perspective, because they did not live in Southern California and they had no idea what I was going through. They were telling me, well, just send more direct mail. And I'm like, yeah, but I spent $10,000 this month in direct mail and haven't got paid back. Like that is really bad advice. And that's because they were taking their world Midwest perspective to California. They had no business giving me advice, no offense. But that, you know, so you want to search for a mentor that has the same perspective. So does this mentor have experience in a landlord's market? If your market is more of a landlord's market, like, does he or she have that experience in it? Yeah, cool. You know, does she live if you're like me, you know, you live in a high price area like Seattle, California, New York, like, you want somebody that has that experience of like, yeah, I live in a high price area and I have to do it virtually. But I think also the most important is the market that they're in. Like I can speak for myself. I have developer market, flipper market, and landlord. It's all three. I've done them all. If you are talking to a mentor and they only have like a landlord market experience, they're not going to have the same perspective. Yeah. And they might give you bad advice.
Right. I think that's a great point. Pace wants to know what book you're reading right now.
The Road Less Stupid.
It's an amazing book.
So good. I love it.
Yeah, I picked that up a few months ago, and I haven't been that excited about a book since Never Split the Difference.
Oh, same. I've not read Never Split the Difference, but same. Like I love that one. That one and the Atomic Habits was pretty good, but no, this one is money.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to read this multiple times.
Me too. No, I'm not done yet, but I love it, and I love the term dumb tax. I mean, I can't describe like what I've done many times in my life, like paid dumb taxes.
And those dumb taxes are expensive.
They are.
They're not like a small percentage.
Oh yeah, I mean, no, they aren't. I tell people in virtual, like a lot of people that try to go virtual, they pay a lot of dumb taxes. I mean, these are like 5-figure mistakes that people make because they don't get a JV partner and they want to do it all themselves in their first deal in a market that they don't have. They have 5 buyers on their buyers list. Like, but I'm going to do it all myself and keep all my profits, like all of what, 0? Because you didn't know how to move the house. Like,
and just for everyone that's listening, to clarify, dumb tax is the unforced, unnecessary mistakes that we make because we just didn't think more clearly.
And they cost a lot of money.
They cost a lot of money.
So they call it a dumb tax.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've made so many. I've made them.
All right, so we already answered these questions. Annie says hi.
Hey, Annie. I'll see you tomorrow.
I guess the last question, I don't know if you can answer here, is people want to know, how much is your program?
I can't answer that, but I can give you the link. Or Steve, did you want to include you have the link? That's right.
I'll post the link on
post the link, right?
Cool. So we answered a lot of these questions. So right now, what is your biggest struggle?
I mean, COVID was pretty much a legit struggle for me. I would say that's like everybody's legit struggle, and it's not with business. It was more of having my kids home. If you guys, I don't know if anybody knows this, I was supposed to be on this like 3 months ago, and COVID, because my kids got kicked out of school, I had to postpone this. But I would say now I'm in a coaching role and I'm running my business, and I have my 2 girls that are my number 1 priority. And I think that I am struggling a little bit with the work-life balance. I don't want my kids to go to the wayside of my career. And as a female, as a mom, like this is not a female-male issue, but as a mom, a father, a mother, father, when you get a new job, a new career, although it's an amazing opportunity and I love what I'm doing, I am in that period of like, I want to still make sure that I'm giving my kids everything that I was able to give them. So time blocking has been a challenge for me.
And I totally understand that, because for a long time I was really good. I was working 30, 35 hours a week. Right. All these businesses going, but kids are first. But man, there's even, as an entrepreneur, we keep adding more things to our plate. And now there's that struggle for me too. So, I appreciate you sharing that. What is your superpower?
I would say my superpower, I've done so much direct to seller marketing in 8 years. It's all I've ever done. And speaking, negotiating deals directly with sellers. So sales and seller negotiation, everything direct to seller that's all I know.
Sounds like you enjoy it.
Well, it's just all I know. So, yeah. But I mean, to be honest, I don't talk to sellers. I train people now too. Yeah. I haven't talked to a seller in years. I mean, I've had employees doing this for at least 5 years. So
you've been doing this for a very long time.
But I train them how to do it. So, yeah.
Awesome. So, I want you to think about last thoughts you want to leave the listeners with. I'll make a couple of quick announcements. Guys, so we had a workshop. Well, last time we talked about on the show was 3 months ago. So we had a workshop in April, got canceled. So we're going to be doing it. Right now we're looking in July 10, 11, 12th in the Phoenician. So if you guys are interested in that, go to disruptors.com. And next week we've got Cody Barton, who basically made Pace. Like, Pace was nobody until he started working with Cody. So we're going to have Cody Barton here next week talking about scaling. So last thoughts.
Well, gosh, I think I would want to leave you. I don't want to leave you guys with the impression that this was always easy for me and that I was this overnight success. I am the definition of a turtle. I did not have this quick luck with this business, and not everybody does. So I don't want anyone to be discouraged if you don't have that like quick, overnight success thing with real estate, wholesaling, investing, and whatnot. I truly believe that part of where I'm at today was a compilation and the compound effect of my habits throughout these 8 years. Every day I worked. Every day I listened to something that I would read, maybe a chapter. Sometimes I don't have time for a chapter. I'd read a paragraph, or you're listening to a podcast real quick. And I always worked. I worked at it. I made good choices and I have good habits. And I think that compilation over 8 years is where, why I'm here, today. So yeah, maybe I wasn't an overnight success, and that doesn't, I truly though enjoyed the journey. And I think that anybody who's not you're frustrated, why didn't I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and then all of a sudden I'm closing all
the
these
money
deals.
just fell on me.
Yeah, right. How come I'm not that successful guy or girl? And it's not everybody is. I certainly wasn't. And but make good choices, have good habits, work on your habits, and try to improve those habits every day, and you will eventually get there if you don't give up.
Yeah, I think that's a great message. So if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, how would they get a hold of you?
Well, I would say following me on Instagram. My handle is This Mom Flips. I'm sure we can put that in the show notes.
Yep, we will.
If you guys are interested in the virtual investing mastery program, you have a link that you'll be sharing. I think those are the best ways to get a hold of me. Also, we can share my email.
Yep.
If you want to do, it's Lauren@thismomflips.com.
There you go. That's her why. That's it.
This Mom Flips.
All right. So, guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for accommodating with the craziness and finally making it onto the show.
I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Disruptors. Yeah. See, we real estate disruptors.